today our topic of discussion is heme biosynthesis. Heme is basically a compound which is present in the hemoglobin, which is the primary component of RBC. Apart from being present in the red blood cells, it is also heme is also present in cytochrome 450, myoglobin, and various other compounds. So these heme biosynthesis is a very important process which takes place inside the body. So this heme is a primary component of hemoglobin. So the normal hemoglobin concentration in the body of a human being ranges from about 14.5 to 16. So, and it varies from both men's and women's, and so it depends on the sex of the individual. So hemoglobin range is about 14.5 to 16. In the hemoglobin molecule, there is about, in each molecule of hemoglobin, there is about 3.4 gram of iron atom which is present. So hemoglobin consists of 3.4 gram of iron. This 3.4 gram of iron which is present per gram of hemoglobin is actually present inside the heme group. So this heme is basically it is made up of 4 pyrrole rings. These pyrrole rings are joined by methylene groups, or the methylene group is nothing but this. This is the methylene group. So it is joined by methylene group and it has an iron atom which is at the center, and the iron is present in the ferrous state or the Fe2 plus state. So this is basically a structure of and this iron atom is actually joined by the pyrrole rings with the nitrogen atom. So this is the structure somewhat what heme molecule looks like, and so this is the structure of heme. So this iron is present in the 2 plus state or in the ferrous state. So this molecule of iron, which is rather this molecule of heme, consists of the main component of the hemoglobin. So this heme protein. Now let's come to the what is the biosynthesis pathway of the hemoglobin molecule. So the biosynthesis pathway of heme requires 2 important constituents. One is the glycine molecule, which is an amino acid, and other is requires glycine and also requires succinyl-CoA. Succinyl-CoA, as we all know, is a very important PCA cycle intermediate. These two reacts with a enzyme called ALA synthase to form alpha amino beta keto adipic acid. This further reacts with another molecule of ALA synthase to form delta amino levulinate. Here we require PLP or pyridoxal 5' phosphate as a coenzyme. Next, after this alpha amino levulinate has been synthesized, this alpha amino levulinate will undergo a reaction where there will be reaction with amino levulinate dehydratase. Here there will be an elimination of 2 molecules of H2O. This is actually we require 2 molecules of ALA, and then these 2 molecules of H2O are removed. We get what is known as the prophylinogen. We get something called the prophylinogen. The prophylinogen then is acted upon by 2 enzymes. Prophylinogen deaminase plus uroporphyrinogen 3 co-synthase. Here we are having elimination of two molecules, not two rather, 4 molecules of NH3, and we take 4 molecules of profobilinogen, which on reaction with profobilinogen deaminase and uroporphyrinogen 3 co-synthase gives uroporphyrinogen. Uroporphyrinogen on reaction with uroporphyrinogen D-carboxylase. Here again we lose 2 molecules of CO2 to finally give a compound called copraporphyrinogen. This copraporphyrinogen is acted upon by copraporphyrinogen 3 oxidase to form 3 oxidase to form protoporphyrinogen. Protoporphyrinogen then is acted upon by protoporphyrinogen oxidase to form protoporphyrin, which is then acted upon by ferrochelatase or heme synthase to form heme. So in this process we actually finally get the product heme. So, and moreover, one more important thing is that here in this step where we use protoporphyrinogen 3 oxidase, here we convert NADH to NAD plus. So here in this step we are getting a NADH and H plus. So first what happens is lysine plus succinyl CoA, as we have already discussed. Lysine is a very important amino acid, whereas succinyl CoA is a molecule which is a TCA cycle intermediate. It gets acted upon by ALA synthase or ALA synthase to form alpha amino and beta keto adipic acid. This alpha amino beta keto adipic acid then again acted upon by ALA synthase to form delta amino levulinate. Delta amino levulinate, 2 molecules acted upon by an alpha amino levulinate dehydratase, leading to the elimination of 2 molecules of water, give rise to profobilinogen. Profobilinogen, 4 molecules, is acted upon by profobilinogen deaminase and uroporphyrinogen 3 co-synthase, leads to the elimination of 4 molecules of NH3. Leads to the elimination of 4 molecules of NH3, forming the uroporphyrinogen 3. Uroporphyrinogen 3, when it is acted upon by uroporphyrinogen D-carboxylase, leads to the elimination of 2 molecules of CO2, leading to formation of copraporphyrinogen. Copraporphyrinogen 3, when acted upon by copraporphyrinogen 3 oxidase, leads to the conversion of NADH to NAD plus, and therefore leads to the formation of protoporphyrinogen. Protoporphyrinogen acted upon by protoporphyrinogen oxidase to form protoporphyrin. Protoporphyrin is acted upon by ferrochelatase or heme synthase to form heme. Therefore, we get the compound which is our product, which is heme. So, where does the heme biosynthesis primarily take place? Heme biosynthesis primarily takes place in the cells which is associated with the RBC formation or with the cells which has erythropoietic activity. It is also found in cells where of hepatic origin, where it leads to the formation of the cytochrome P450. The cytochrome P450 is a very important compound for drug detoxification. So the hepatic activity of heme biosynthesis will actually depend on the demand of the cytochrome P450 in the body. So it is not that hepatic biosynthesis of heme takes place at regular interval. It will only take place when there is demand for the cell to drive the process. So this is what we have for the heme biosynthesis. Now inside the cell, where does the heme biosynthesis take place? This part of the heme biosynthesis, glycine succinyl CoA 2 formation of delta amino levulinate, this steps takes place inside the mitochondria. After the formation of delta amino levulinate will move out of the mitochondria and will enter the cytosol. The subsequent steps of the pathway up to the topraporphyrinogen step will take place in the cytosol. Up to the topraporphyrinogen step, the reactions will take place in the cytosol. After the topraporphyrinogen 3, the topraporphyrinogen 3 again from the cytosol will re-enter the mitochondria and will go onwards to form the ferrochelatase. So the last steps will take place again in the mitochondria. So these are the steps for the heme biosynthesis. So it starts in the mitochondria up to delta amino levulinate. After that, it takes place inside the cytosol because the delta amino levulinate will exit the mitochondria and will come out to the cytosol where the other enzymes are present. After that, after the formation of topraporphyrinogen 3, it will again re-enter the mitochondria and there it will finally form the heme. And this heme after that will again get associated with the iron and the pyrrole ring structure to form the molecule called the entire molecule. So this is what we have for heme biosynthesis. Now what is the next important thing is that the regulation of heme biosynthesis. The heme biosynthesis basically is feedback. It's actually feedback regulated, means the excess amount of heme when present in the body will actually inhibit the synthesis of the further new amount of heme molecules. So heme is actually itself down regulating the pathway from taking place. Beside that, there is barbiturates. Barbiturates are drugs which are very, very common, and barbiturates will upregulate. Barbiturates will increase the heme biosynthesis. Moreover, there are certain paints and various products which contains lead. The lead will inhibit the ferrochelatase step. This is inhibited by lead, and therefore if a child who has a tendency to bite upon the painted toys, they may suffer from disorders of heme biosynthesis because the lead ions will inhibit this step and thus inhibit the biosynthesis of heme. So lead is an inhibitor of the heme biosynthesis pathway, leading to heme deficiency. Now coming to the clinical aspects of heme biosynthesis. The heme biosynthesis actually can be heme biosynthesis leads to a disorder called porphyria. Leads to a disorder which is called the porphyria. This porphyria is basically can be of two types. One is the hepatic porphyria and is the erythropoietic porphyria. Hepatic porphyria, as its name suggests, if it is involved with the tissues or the cells which are involved in the synthesis of heme inside the liver, will result in something called the hepatic porphyria, and the cells which are involved with the RBC biosynthesis, if they have undergone any problem, they will lead to the erythropoietic porphyria. Now, the hepatic porphyria, the major type of hepatic porphyria which takes place is the acute intermittent porphyria. It is an acute intermittent porphyria, and this porphyria basically leads to the occurs due to the absence of the profobilinogen deaminase. Occurs due to the absence of this enzyme profobilinogen deaminase. So acute intermittent porphyria is one of the major types of most commonly seen porphyria which occurs due to the absence of the profobilinogen. Occurs due to absence of profobilinogen deaminase, PBG deaminase enzyme. And this porphyria will actually lead to the stimulation of the synthesis of allosynthetase. So the allosynthetase enzyme concentration increases in the blood, and therefore we have excess amount of ALA in the blood, and also excess amount of profobilinogen is present inside the blood. So it has excess amount of ALA, which is delta aminolabelinate, and it also has excess amount of profobilinogen present in the blood. So when in acute intermittent porphyria we see absence of PBG deaminase enzyme, it is basically autosomal dominant. It is actually an autosomal dominant disease. It is actually genetically regulated. It is due to the absence of profobilinogen deaminase enzyme, and this actually will lead to the stimulation of the allosynthetase enzyme, leading to increased concentration of ALA, which is delta aminolabelinate, and also the profobilinogen molecule. So this is what we have for acute intermittent porphyria. In this case, we do not see that it has the urine or blood sample shows any fluorescent or photosensitive activity, which is basically seen in the case of other type of erythropoietic porphyria. In the case of erythropoietic porphyria, this is one we have already covered. The other which we have is the erythropoietic porphyria. The common erythropoietic porphyria is the erythropoietic porphyria occurs basically due to absence of enzyme uroporphyrinogen 3. It occurs due to the absence of the uroporphyrinogen 3 co-synthase. So it occurs basically due to the absence of this enzyme, and this will actually lead to certain problems, such as it will lead to a condition where there will be redness of the skin, and there will be redness of the skin, there will be increased there will be a reddish tinge in faces, and there will be a tendency of the blood and urine sample to show a fluorescence activity, or it shows a photosensitive activity. So this is what we have. So this erythropoietic porphyria is actually a type of recessive trait. It's a congenitally acquired recessive dominant recessive trait which is being transferred in the erythropoietic porphyria. So this is what we have for the disorders. Now, how can we detect porphyria? Porphyria is detected by the UV fluorescence technique, or here we use UV light. In the case to detect porphyria, we take a blood sample or urine sample. If after passing UV light, if we see that it is giving red fluorescence, then it is a sample which has a which is the patient is positive for porphyria. So this is the condition. So this red fluorescence is very, very important. This red fluorescence, the testing which we perform for seeing the red fluorescence is known as the Ehrlich test. It is known as the Ehrlich test. This Ehrlich test is very important for the detection, and for the treatment. For the treatment of porphyria, we actually inject iron sample along with hematine. Hematine is also a protein molecule, which is also a heme containing molecule, and we inject hematine with iron for supplementation of the if somehow a patient suffers from porphyria. This will lead to the recovery in the case of porphyria, where there is inhibition of the heme biosynthesis pathway. Now we will move on to the hemoglobin or heme degradation pathway. So heme degradation is a very important thing, but before coming to heme degradation, let's come a few more things about the hemoglobin molecule. The hemoglobin molecule has an iron atom which is present in the ferrous state. This iron atom actually has a 6 covalent bond which is empty for the proper reversible binding of oxygen molecule. Therefore, there are these iron atoms which can lead to the formation of these leads to the formation of a molecule called the oxyhemoglobin, when hemoglobin is bound to oxygen molecule, or subsequently the carboxyhemoglobin, where this is taken up by carbon monoxide molecule. So this is a brief information about the pathway of, or rather the hemoglobin part. Coming to the heme degradation pathway. Heme degradation pathway basically is a normal process which takes place in the body when the RBC gets old, or when the RBC is undergoing apoptosis, or RBC is undergoing death. The RBC undergoes death at a period of about 120 days after the formation, and this apoptosis or the cell death takes place due to the decrease in the NADPH activity. This NADPH is actually NADPH which is supplied by the hexose monophosphate shunt pathway, which takes place inside the RBC molecule. Now, the degradation pathway. Heme degradation pathway, as we have already discussed, starts when an RBC is about 120 days old, and this RBC is now being taken up. RBC is being taken up by the macrophages. Macrophages takes up this RBC. When macrophages take up this RBC, this breaks down. It will break down into hemoglobin. This hemoglobin molecule will actually then give rise to various structures. Before that, hemoglobin will be converted to a structure called the choleglobin. This choleglobin is actually a green colored compound. And here the pyrrole ring which is present in the hemoglobin molecule will be broken down into a linear chain. So there will be a linear chain of compound. This choleglobin will further be degraded to iron, globin and biliverdin. This iron enters the iron pool of the storage of the body. Globin enters the amino acid pool or the protein pool, not amino acid pool, it's rather the protein pool. This biliverdin is further reduced with the help of enzyme biliverdin reductase to form bilirubin. This entire process, RBC to broken down into hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is further broken down to choleglobin, which is green colored pigment. This choleglobin is further being broken down into the three components iron, globin and biliverdin. Biliverdin then reduced to bilirubin. This entire pathway takes place inside the macrophage. This entire pathway will take place inside the macrophage. Then this released bilirubin will get conjugated with albumin, which is a plasma protein. Albumin, which is a very important plasma protein required in the body, and this albumin bilirubin complex is what is known as the unconjugated bilirubin. This is the unconjugated bilirubin. When bilirubin is bound to albumin, it is known as the unconjugated bilirubin. This unconjugated bilirubin is lipid soluble and is not at all water soluble, and so it cannot be excreted out by the glomerular filtration process, or cannot be thrown away by the kidney. Therefore, this unconjugated bilirubin then enters the liver, and this conjugation of bilirubin and albumin is broken down, and now the bilirubin will bind with the UDP glucuronic acid. Now bilirubin will binds with UDP glucuronic acid. Will bind with UDP glucuronic acid to form what is known as the conjugated bilirubin. This conjugated bilirubin, which is formed after the unconjugated bilirubin enters the liver, gets broken, then gets separated, and then again bound with UDP glucuronic acid, forms the conjugated bilirubin. This conjugated bilirubin is water soluble and can be eliminated by the kidney. This conjugated bilirubin next enters, this conjugated bilirubin is now released into the bile, and a small amount of the conjugated bilirubin enters this conjugated bilirubin enters bile, small part enters circulation, and gets filtered out of the kidney as urine bilirubin. The major part, or the 80% of the conjugated bilirubin will after the entering the bile will move towards the ileum. In the ileum, there is various bacteria which is present in the intestine, which will act upon the conjugated bilirubin, and then it will convert it to, this bilirubin will get converted to the an enzyme which it will be acted upon by beta glucuronidase to form stercobilinogen, or which is the fetal bilirubin, or the fetal urobilinogen or fetal bilirubin. So this ileum, there are microbes which will be releasing beta glucuronidase. Beta glucuronidase will act upon the bilirubin and convert it to fetal bilirubin or stercobilinogen. This stercobilinogen, after this, most of the stercobilinogen will be reabsorbed from the intestine and will enter the enterohepatic circulation, and only 20% will be eliminated out of the body. So the part which is going to be reabsorbed from the stercobilinogen, which enters the enterohepatic circulation, will be used up for the synthesis of new bile. So this is what we have for the urobilinogen pathway. This is the formation of the stercobilinogen and urine urobilinogen. Urine bilirubin is also known as the urobilinogen. So this is the pathway of the degradation process of heme molecule, where hemoglobin is broken down to biliverdin, and finally it is giving rise to bilirubin. Bilirubin is being excreted out of the urine as urine urobilinogen, and in the fetal matter as fetal bilirubin or the stercobilinogen, which is getting converted due to the enzymes which are being released by the gut microflora, the microorganism present in the gut, which is secreting an enzyme called beta glucuronidase. So this is what we have in the heme degradation pathway. Now coming to the diseases associated with the heme degradation pathway. The heme degradation pathway is basically leading to the formation of bilirubin. The normal bilirubin level in the serum bilirubin level is 0.2 to 0.8 mg per dl. If the level of bilirubin inside the blood exceeds that of 1.8 to 2, we will see that there will be accumulation of bilirubin there will be accumulation of bilirubin in the sclera and in the mucous lining of the various body parts, and even the skin turns yellow. So this is a condition which we call it to be the condition called jaundice or icterus. So this is the condition where there is excess bilirubin inside the blood. So now this jaundice can basically be classified into three types of jaundice. One can be hemolytic jaundice, one can be hepatocellular jaundice, and other can be obstructive jaundice. One is a hemolytic, one is hepatocellular, and other is an obstructive jaundice. Hemolytic jaundice, as the name suggests, occurs due to the excess breakdown of RBC molecule. If there is excess breakdown hepatocellular jaundice occurs when there is a problem with the conjugation of the bilirubin molecule with UDP, glucuronic acid. So here there will be due to defect in the conjugation of bilirubin with UDP, glucuronic acid. And the obstructive jaundice occurs primarily due to the obstruction in the flow of bile. So this is a hemolytic jaundice, this is hepatocellular jaundice, where there is a problem with the in the conjugation process. Obstructive jaundice occurs due to the obstruction in the flow of bile. Now the hemolytic jaundice, then here we will see the kind of bilirubin which accumulates. In this case we will see unconjugated bilirubin to accumulate. Here we will see both unconjugated and conjugated bilirubin and conjugated to accumulate, and here we will see only the conjugated bilirubin here we will see the presence of urine urobilinogen present, urine urobilinogen is absent, present and present. Urine stertobilinogen is present, is absent, present and present. And the last one is the fetal bilirubin. Fetal bilirubin will be present in the case of hemolytic jaundice. It will be mildly present, giving a clay-like appearance to the, it is mildly present. Giving clay-like appearance. And in the last part, in the obstructive jaundice, it is having nearly absence of the stertobilinogen, and therefore there will be almost no bilirubin present, and therefore it is going to have a completely clay color of the fecal matter. So these are the various types of jaundice which are based on the various disease. Moreover, we have seen another type of hemolytic jaundice. Hemolytic jaundice in some cases may be drug induced, as we have seen, which occurs basically due to deficiency of G6PD or glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficient people. In most cases they show drug induced hemolytic anemia, which may lead to the hemolytic jaundice. this hemolytic jaundice, hemolytic anemia leading to hemolytic jaundice. Therefore, this G6PD is a very important enzyme which is actually required for the drug metabolism of certain drug metabolism, such as some anti-malarial drugs. So this is what we have for the bilirubin degradation, and rather not bilirubin degradation, heme degradation. So this is the entire thing for heme biosynthesis and heme degradation pathway. Hope you enjoyed this, and please do subscribe the channel. Thank you.